if you're injured and in a car crash, I think gathering facts, like we mentioned before, gathering witnesses, if you're able to do that and you're not more severely injured, is important. But in terms of who pays medical bills, most people who have auto insurance have a part of their policy that will actually pay medical bills regardless of whether the car accident is your fault or not. And a lot of people don't know that. You do not necessarily have to have your own health insurance that's going to pay those bills. You can submit the bills to your health insurance company. Some people don't have health insurance, and you should look to your own auto policy, and everybody should go back in their drawers after the show and make sure that your auto insurance policy has medical payments coverage, and how much do you have?
A lot of people probably don't look at their policies, and a lot of people get these minimum policies, and probably not enough in these days with expenses and things like that, and probably could, if they can afford to, get as much insurance as they can for the auto accident cases. Next issue is what happens if when your car is damaged. They always want to say, well, who's going to pay for the damage to my car? Who's going to take care of that?
Well, a lot of automobile insurance policies, depending on what level of insurance you're at, you might have your own collision coverage. But if you don't, that's when you're going to get into a dispute with the other person's insurance company. And I think being in an auto accident, unfortunately, is almost a universal experience for anybody who's been driving for a period of time. So the first thing you're going to do is call a police, or someone's going to call a police to the scene. And while the police is there, you're going to exchange that information. You're going to find out who the other person's insurance company is. You're going to give them your insurance information, and at least then you have a contact point for your own property damage.
Yeah, you mentioned about who's going to pay for the damage. It's similar if depending. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. If your own auto insurance policy had what's called collision coverage, and not all policies have them. In Illinois, you have to have liability insurance coverage, meaning if you injure somebody else, that other person can. It will pursue your own liability policy. But collision coverage is different. People have old cars, and they decide that they don't want to pay that extra premium. And in those situations, if the accident is not your fault and you do not have collision coverage, you're going to have to look to the other person's insurance company. It makes it very difficult to get your car back up and running, and so that you can go to work. So again, go home and look at your policy. Make sure you have collision coverage.
Now, let's say you get a ticket. Let's say you're the person that the police officer thinks is his fault, and you go to court. And there's always the question: is do I need an attorney? What if I plead guilty? Can they use this against me in a civil case? And what happens in those situations when you see you go to court 2 years later in the trial? Can that be used against you?
Well, if you take a guilty plea, that's a statement, that's an admission, and yes, it can be used in a civil suit. To the extent, it'll depend on what you actually plead guilty to.
And Ron, what do you advise your clients who are, let's say, the injured person who's not at fault in the case? Do you tell them to go to traffic court? They always ask you, should I go to traffic court?
Yeah,
don't go to traffic court? Obviously, like the other person to plead guilty for whatever reason.
That's a good question. As Judge indicated, if the other person pleads guilty, then that can be, and they plead guilty to a ticket that involves being careless, which contributed to the accident, that can be used against that person if you ever have a lawsuit. Now, if you don't go to court, the other person's ticket will probably get dropped unless there were witnesses that were there. And it's important to remember that that doesn't mean that you still can't prove your case.
Well, that's what some people think, oh my gosh, they dismissed the case, or I didn't show up and the case was dismissed. Is that going to be used? They found it against me in the traffic case or whatever. Does that have anything to do with my civil case? What happens in the traffic court?
If the person's ticket gets dismissed for whatever reason, that's not something that person can introduce to defend themselves in the case. So the answer to the question is, you do not have to go to traffic court to be able to pursue your case against the other driver.
People have to remember that there's a different standard in traffic court. Traffic court is on a criminal standard, not on a civil standard.
Okay.
Sometimes it's even good just to get an idea for what they're going to say later down the line as far as their theories of the case or how they think it happened, if there's some debate about that.
We only have 5 more minutes in the show. We have a lot to talk about, but maybe we could give our viewers just an idea to take them through the case, just briefly, from the standpoint of the plaintiff or the defense, and then from Your Honor's standpoint for the court, just what happens, briefly going through the stages and where you get to trial.
Sure. I guess I'll start because the plaintiff goes first.
All right.
In cases.
I'll give you each a minute.
I'll take them. The plaintiff files a lawsuit, and the complaint is served on the defendant. The sheriffs actually go to the person's house and serves, or wherever they can find the person, serves them with the papers, and that starts the lawsuit. And I think from there, that's when you want to take over and notify either your insurance company or get yourself a lawyer, and I'll bet you Lisa has more to say on that.
And from the defense standpoint, if you're defending somebody, what's the next procedure that goes through in the courts? After the lawsuit's filed, what happens next in the second stage of the lawsuit?
Well, you would answer the pleadings, you would investigate it, you would talk to, you would be assigned legal counsel if you're the person. Your insurance company would do that. Say it's an automobile case, you would be assigned counsel who would be representing you in the case.
And who pays for that?
That would be covered by your insurance. Okay. That's what your premiums are for when you pay insurance.
Okay.
And so and again, it just goes back to, as long as you're cooperating, this person would be assigned to you, and they would be free of charge, and they would be your attorneys. And they would speak to you and help you investigate what happened and sort of devise what your defense strategy is in the case.
And from there, the parties will exchange papers, written questions and answers. They'll give depositions, which are under oath statements about what occurred, and ultimately the case will be ready for trial. Where we
and before it gets to trial, does the courts or involvement try to get these cases settled, and are most cases settled?
Absolutely. While the parties are exchanging information and engaging in discovery and fact-finding, it's usually monitored by a judge as it works its way up the system. And when the parties are ready, or when the facts get to the point where the parties look like they could be ready to talk settlement, there's usually a suggestion that they sit down with a judge or a mediator and see if they can come to a resolution. If they don't, we go to the next step, and at that point, there's always that suggestion that we sit down with a judge or a mediator and try it one more time.
And if not, then you have a jury trial.
If
right?
not, then they can tell the judge that they're ready for trial. They'll be assigned a trial judge, and they'll go to jury or non-jury, depending on what the choice is.
Right.
And that usually process takes in Cook County now in the law division how long?
Well, optimistically, 2 years on the outside, and I've seen some go faster. But it can go much longer than that, depending on how complex the issues are, or depending on if a person is injured and the injury is ongoing.
Well, we're just about out of time, so I know we had a lot to cover in that particular segment, and I'd like to thank my guests, the Honorable Susan Zwick, Ron Kalish, and Lisa Velez for being our guests tonight on Illinois Law, sponsored by the Illinois State Bar Association. And if we haven't answered all your questions, you certainly can go online or go talk to your own personal injury lawyer. If you do have a claim for any kind of personal injury, make sure you contact a lawyer and get the proper legal counsel for those types of cases. Thank you for watching the show, and good night. Good evening. This is Illinois Law, sponsored by the Illinois State Bar Association. I'm Sam Kavathis, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. Our topic tonight is going to be professional negligence. And to help me with tonight's topics, my guests are Lisa Velez, and Lisa is an associate at the firm of Cassidy Shoddy LLP. And Cassidy Shoddy is a defense firm specializing in professional liability, products liability, construction, and insurance coverage, among other practices. Ms. Velez is a member of the Illinois State Bar Association and the Hispanic Lawyers Association of Illinois. She is also a member of her firm's Diversity Committee. Ms. Velez also serves on the board of directors for Save a Pet Adoption Center, a no-kill adoption center in Grays Lake. Lisa, welcome to tonight's show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My second guest is Ron Kalish. Ron has been a trial lawyer since 1992. He is a partner in the law firm of Steinberg, Goodman, and Kalish. Ron has handled all types of personal injury cases, including medical negligence, product liability, nursing home, and other various personal injury claims. He's also argued cases before the Illinois Appellate Court, the Illinois Court of Claims, the United States Bankruptcy Court of the Northern District of Illinois. In addition, Ron gives back to the community by volunteering his time to an outreach program for the Chicago Public Elementary Schools called Lawyers in the Classroom, coordinated by the Constitutional Rights Foundation. Ron also has been appointed pro bono counsel in federal courts to represent plaintiffs in litigation in the Northern District of Illinois. Ron, welcome to tonight's show.
Thank you for having me.
And my